We're going to go ahead and get started with our presentation here. So we are presenting with the Civic Nebraska project, and our project title is the Election Protection Program. First, I'd like to introduce the organization we've been working with. So we've been working with a nonprofit right here out of Lincoln called Civic Nebraska, and they're focused on creating initiatives to empower voters to exercise and recognize their rights within democracy. And so our project specifically pertains to their voting rights initiative, which actually sends out volunteers to various polling locations on election day and records various metrics such as ADA accessibility, wait times, and potentially other obstacles that may prevent voters from casting a ballot. And so now looking to some of the main project stakeholders and people we work closely with over the past year. First, we have John Cartier, who's actually here today. He's the Director of Voting Rights for Civic Nebraska. We have Heather Engdahl, who's joined us on Teams a few times, who's the Voting Rights Field Manager. Mike Forsyth is the Returning Citizen Program Manager, and then also Margaret Marsh, who's the Voting Rights Field Organizer. And then to introduce the members of the team and the management team. So we have Sam here, who's a developer. We have Sebastian in the audience, who's also a developer. We have Kyle here, who's a developer as well. We have Troy, who's joining us via Teams today because he's in Dallas for a robotics tournament, so couldn't be with us here today. Myself, I'm the development manager. And then we have Sean also in the audience, Sean Halabaugh, who's a developer. And then our project manager was Melanie Cougar-Wright, and Brady Garvin was our tribe lead. So now kind of introducing the problem and why Civic Nebraska came to senior design for this application is that all of their existing documentation collected on election day was in written document form. And as you can imagine, with however many precincts there are across Nebraska, with 3 forms each that observers have to fill out, that can be a lot of paperwork. And so there was an opportunity to essentially digitize this process and allow a better organization mechanism for how we can actually view these forms retroactively and also be able to submit them. Additionally, the digitized application would allow us to easily edit forms in the event of a mistake and not have to give business to whiteout. So now kind of introducing the application that we built over the course of the year. So the main application interface shows a map of all of the various precincts across the state of Nebraska, and all of the forms that are submitted through a precinct are then tied to that precinct. So for example, that information button would lead you to each of the forms, so you could see each of the forms submitted at that location. And so we also have authentication mechanisms to allow authenticated users, such as those poll observers, to fill out forms.
So after a user clicks on a polling location on the homepage map, they'll be routed to the precinct information page, where at the top, a few lines of information about the precinct is displayed. And then below that, the main piece of functionality for the page is going to be a table with the list of all previous form inputs for that precinct. So, and each of these forms are just going to be displaying a few pieces of information about the form, and then have a view button to route you to another page where all the previous inputs are displayed. And then along with that, above the forms table, we do have a little module with functionality included to filter and search through the list. So users are able to do that. And then if they have the correct permissions, they can also see the Add New Entry button, where a modal appears on the page, and all inputs that should be connected to each form in the form submission batch, possibly, is inputted. And then along with that, they input a form type, which will decide which of the 3 forms they route to. So on the right here, you can just see the ADA compliance form, which is one of these forms that they can route to.
And so our application uses the service Auto. Oh. Hello? Testing? All right, sorry about that. Our program uses the service Auth to both authenticate and authorize its users. And this gives admins access to a dashboard where they can set the permissions available to each user role and then allocate those user roles to every user for the application. And so, for example, when not logged in, you will still have access to the main map and all of the read-only forms that have been submitted, but only authorized observers will be able to actually submit new forms, and then admins will have access to an admin page like this, where you can add another election to be used in forms as needed, and additional voting locations onto the main map.
Great, thanks so much, Sam. So that was a very high-level overview of the application. Obviously, it's quite a bit more intricate, and we've spent the entire year working on it. And so we're proud of the work we were able to provide for this great organization. And so kind of piggybacking off of that, some of the value and highlights that we were able to derive from this. So ultimately in the value, this effectively mitigates the need for Civic Nebraska to manually sift through, those papers and documentation, kind of bringing it ahead into the 21st century. And so that sort of work is always inherently valuable. Additionally, some of the highlights that we were able to collect as a team, creating and working with complex digital forms. So we had to ensure that all of the data being submitted was valid and acceptable for our database to process. That was a very large process for our team to get under wrap. Additionally, employing a complex digital workflow. So ensuring that the code that our team was submitting was consistent across all of our members, ensuring that we're enforcing a code style so that we're writing neat, clean code that's going to be great for maintainers of the application in the future. And then also ensuring that the application provides secure submission. So security in elections obviously has been a hot button issue for the past, however long. And so we went ahead and implemented role-based access mechanisms, as we mentioned, to ensure that authorized users are the only people submitting data to the application. All right. And so that pretty much wraps up our presentation here. Are there any questions?